On the phone with us now is CBS News Chief White House Correspondent Major Garrett, who was at that speech in Virginia Beach. Major, what stood out to you?
Well, this was originally scheduled to be a speech about veterans reforms, and Donald Trump stuck to that script and did mention it, but it is overshadowed by the two much larger issues looming over this presidential campaign and the nation's sense of unease over all of the events of last week, not just in Baton Rouge and suburban St. Paul, but then the ambush in Dallas. And this is the first opportunity Trump has had to give his own voice to his collective thoughts about that. And if you were to try to distill what Donald Trump said, you would have to say he distilled it in a way to emphasize, above all else, loyalty to the police, law and order, and a sense that those preempt any other discussion or any other long-term focus on underlying grievances in the black community about the misapplication of justice, the misapplication of deadly force, or any sense that they have that they are jeopardized when they interact with police forces around the country. I mean, in a way that was consistent with a very short statement that Donald Trump put out last Friday in the aftermath of the Dallas ambush, he gave almost no voice at all to the sense of collective grievance about policing, the use of deadly force, and its disproportionate use against African Americans in this country. And again, here today, if you were to count the number of words devoted to law and order, justice, standing with the police, standing with law enforcement, they would probably constitute 90%, maybe 95% of Donald Trump's orientation to that issue. When he says, I'm the law and order candidate, he is standing alongside police and criticizing those who raise questions about police tactics or methodologies. And the other part of the speech that overshadowed the original intent, which was to talk about reforming the Veterans Administration, was his very stinging comments about Hillary Clinton, the most lengthy he's given on the campaign trail. And he was criticized last week when Hillary Clinton was the focus of our national conversation more than the aftermath of Dallas, that he didn't hit Hillary Clinton nearly hard enough and didn't bring up in specificity what his sense of her actions was and wasn't. Well, today he was unstinting in his criticism, called her a secretary of status quo, said she would never change this country, never bring about change, but would just continue to bring about either dishonesty or scandal and or both. All of those comments resonated very well with a small, hand-picked audience here in Virginia Beach, Virginia, for this speech originally intended to talk about veterans reform. But in the politics of the moment, both Hillary Clinton and this ongoing debate in our country about what is or is not justice, what are or are not lawful and defensible police tactics, Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee, came down lockstep with America's local police and very critical of Hillary Clinton.
Major, I'm curious, we're just a week away from the Republican National Convention. How important is it that Donald Trump continues to portray this more disciplined and controlled presence on the campaign trail leading into the convention?
Well, it's very important to his inner circle. And if you take today's speech, it is clear that today, at least, it was important to Donald Trump. And it was important throughout the weekend. Trump said almost nothing. He did no public events over the weekend. He canceled the scheduled campaign event in Miami on Friday in the aftermath of the Dallas ambush, and then was, by his standards, very infrequently on Twitter and, generally speaking, more meek and mild than Trump typically is. So you could feel the inner circle of the Trump campaign sort of constraining Trump and keeping him out of the public view, out of the public conversation until today's event. And that's 3 or 4 days now where Trump has been far less visible, much quieter than he typically is, even though the nation he seeks to lead was having a roiling and intense and heart-rendering conversation about where we are in terms of race relations, where we are in terms of the application of justice, and where we are in terms of dealing with community relationships between the police and those that they seek to protect. Trump stayed out of that almost entirely. He was not on the Sunday shows, invisible in many respects on Twitter, except for a couple here and there. So you can feel as the convention approaches 1 week hence in Cleveland that his inner circle is really tightening the screws on Trump to keep him in the traces that they've outlined for him, both in terms of rhetoric and visibility. One last point I would make, Meg, about what's interesting this week is by Friday, we're going to find out who Donald Trump's running mate is. And the two of the leading contenders, I don't want to say the only two, but two clearly of the leading contenders, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie and the former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. And if you compare and contrast where Gingrich and Christie have been on these issues of justice, race relations, law and order, etc., on Friday, Newt Gingrich said, look, white America has got to come to a new understanding about the legitimate fears blacks in America have, adults, children, and everything in between, about dealing with police. And what did Chris Christie say here in Virginia Beach, introducing Donald Trump? Law and order, law and order, law and order. Stand with the cops, stand with the police. Don't give any quarter on this conversation about whether the police do is right or wrong. So if you're looking at those who are trying out to be Donald Trump's running mate, one was very consistent with Trump's message. That would be Chris Christie. Newt Gingrich offered an entirely different vision. We'll see how it plays out for the remainder of the week. But that certainly struck me here, looking at the Trump campaign and those who may run with him on the ticket.
The tryouts have been very interesting to watch. Major Garrett for us on the campaign trail with Donald Trump. Thank you so much.